Hello, everybody. Long time no see. I have not done a video in quite a while, so I thought it might be time to update and do another one. So I've been really busy with acting gigs, which has been awesome. I had four sort of contracts in a row, kind of overlapping many of them, and so I finally got done with those a couple of weeks ago. So I haven't really had time for this video, this YouTube thing. Also, I wasn't really, I'm not getting a ton of views. I don't really put a lot of effort into this. I wished I did. I wish I had more time for more fancy editing and graphics and that sort of thing, but I don't. So it is what it is. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna. I even thought about just not even doing any more videos, particularly about gaming. Maybe some other stuff about like little travels or occasionally the acting stuff also doesn't seem to be a super big interest to most people. But I'm back regardless. Today's going to be about gaming. Specifically, we're going to talk about Savage Kingdoms, which I haven't as much lately because I've been talking more about Red Sun, my other game that's hopefully coming out soon. But today's video is pretty exciting because it's about yeah. So here's the new shirt, right? There you go. Check it out. So it's about that game right there. My OG game from 12 years ago was the first edition. Also, I'm wearing my Dollywood hat in honor of Miss Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean. So as we know, who sadly passed away yesterday. So yeah, so this is kind of in honor because we're season pass holders for Dollywood, and we've seen Dolly in a couple of special events up close, and where she's saying "I will always love you" and just stuff like that. And my wife and I have even performed with some of her kinfolk in the area. So though we didn't really know her personally, we were kind of peripherally involved. So it was pretty. I mean, as you could like everybody, like she touched everybody's life. So yeah, but 80 years is pretty good, and she got so much accomplished. Like, most of us wish we could do 5%, 10% of what she did, particularly all the contributions back to the community and stuff like that. So, but anyway, this video isn't specifically about Miss Dolly Parton or Dollywood. So, but it's about Savage Kingdoms, right? The cool shirt that I just showed you. So, um, pretty exciting update to Savage Kingdom. So Savage Kingdom's fourth edition, assuming I finally come out with it because I've been hemming and hawing the last couple of years, focusing more on Red Sun. So I'm looking at maybe I'm going to get both systems out. But I have to admit something because this video is coming with a big admittance that I was getting quite burned out on Savage Kingdom, my own game, right? I mean, I love the setting still. There's parts of it that are as interesting to me anymore, but overall, still love the setting. I even love the system mostly. But as I've gotten older, and I get more into gaming philosophy, I don't know if I've mentioned this in past videos. If I haven't, I'm mentioning it now. But as I've been doing this hobby or this semi-profession for a while, you learn things, right? Life experience. You do stuff over and over. You learn things. You learn how to tweak it and what to avoid and what to embrace. And sometimes you're still kind of lost because we're all humans. And so as we get older or exist longer, we kind of change, right? Our tastes change as well. It should be, honestly. Maybe our taste in food changes a little bit. Maybe our taste in music changes, or maybe it doesn't even necessarily change, but it adds to, right? Becomes cumulative. So what I'm getting at is that so as I've gotten older with certain tabletop role playing games, particularly even my own Savage Kingdoms, and especially for D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, which I run professionally on the weekends and like summer camps and stuff like that. I mean, as some of y'all probably know, it's not my favorite game. I just have a old nostalgic attachment to it, going back to 1979, 1980. I think is when I started. Crazy. So, like most of us, we have this kind of nostalgic attachment to it, but also we have this kind of McDonald's, Coca-Cola attachment to it, meaning that it's very familiar to us, like McDonald's or Coca-Cola, where it's like it's a brand, it's there, it's kind of the thing, and it's not necessarily the best stuff in the world, and probably certainly isn't anywhere close to that. But you get used to it, and that's kind of what Dungeons and Dragons is. But anyway, all that to say, even my taste in D&D has like gotten less over the years, or I like a specific like type of Dungeons and Dragons like Dark Sun. I'm running on Saturdays for finally got some of my gamer kids are getting older, they can kind of handle more like grittier settings and stuff like that. And this is before the WotC announcement about Dark Sun being MC17, by the way. I decided to do this a couple of weeks before that announcement. I had no idea that was coming. So I'm running it very innocently from 5e conversions that fans had made. So it's just kind of weird that I'm running it for kids, and all of a sudden WotC makes this announcement that Dark Sun's going to be MC17 or whatever, which I don't know, whatever. It doesn't have to be that. Dark Sun wasn't really any darker and grittier than other D&D settings. Maybe less light and fluffy. It's more about survival and I don't know. Resource management. Yes, it's grittier in a sense, but it's not necessarily gorier or whatever it is that they're going for with the MC17 rating. Anyway, that's another little side. As you know, I will go on tangents as I just said. I want to put that out there because it was kind of weird that I'm like, hey kids, I found some 5e converted Dark Sun stuff. I really want to run this campaign world for you. It's really cool. I remember it's back from the early 90s, and I think it came out in 1991. And you guys are getting older. I think it'll be cool, to give you guys a taste of more survival-based D&D, a little bit more hardcore mode of Dungeons and Dragons. So, and then they make that weird announcement. Anyway, so all that to say, I was like 2 or 3 minutes to set up this thing. So my tastes change, right, from D&D and even Savage Kingdoms. I come up with my own game 12 years ago, usually from a lot of house rules from Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. Uh, and some of you have created games, probably know what I'm talking about. It's like eventually you do enough house rules where the house rules become its own game system or needs to become its own game system. And that's where Savage Kingdoms came from. Created my own rule set, some stuff that I liked through from life experience and gaming experience and things that I didn't like and stuff like that. Crafting it all together as one does and one would. So anyway, I'm at the point in my life to where I've gotten a little bit burned out on SK, particularly some of the rules things that have kind of grind at me, sort of nibbled and been quite an irritant for quite a while. And that's actually the D20 system that I came up with years ago, which I thought it was very innovative. In fact, a lot of people commented that was innovative. There were a couple little side note bad things too, which those criticism I kind of blew off at the time. I'm like, fools, how dare you? No, actually, I did, take it to heart, but I didn't really connect. I was like, okay, that's whatever. Because the positive was more overwhelming. But now, as I've gotten older and played Savage Kingdoms for 12 years and run it and develop it, and now it's going into the fourth edition if I do it. I've determined some of those things, those little criticisms that I heard back in the day, and it was just a few people. Most of it was very overwhelmingly positive, but constructive criticism I really like, is especially if it's from another experienced game designer or at least people that play a game. Somebody that has, not that I disrespect any opinion, but if it's someone that actually has some background in what they're talking about, that opinion to me is rated even higher. So I'm seeing some of those little things that people talked about kind of coming forward, or maybe they're just now bothering me. I'm like, yeah, a couple of those little things about the D20, the exploding 20 system that I came up with that most people think is really cool, and I think it's still kind of okay. It irks me a little bit, but um, and then there was another thing about the cognitive overload or cognitive load of the what I call head math in the game system. As I've gotten older, I'm still pretty quick. I can do improv very quick and stuff like that. I still think pretty quickly for the most part. Uh, and I do head math still pretty quickly, but it still gets like it bogs down, and when the whole game system is kind of based on that. So what I'm getting at, so the D20, the exploding 20 thing, I'm looking at changing a little bit. Not really. It's actually kind of the same. I'll get to in a second. So it's really just two major changes, and then the other thing is damage dice. So if you've played Savage Kingdoms, you might know that everything's baked into the single D20 roll, which I think was pretty innovative. I think a lot of people said it was. I haven't seen any other game like it. I was told by a playtester at DragonCon that he saw another independent game, probably maybe even lesser known than Savage Kingdoms, which is pretty incredible to this barely known, that used the similar or same system that I'm using, like the number of successes above the opponent's defense. To use a combat example, is the base damage modified by maximum damage and armor piercing, stuff like that. Um, So that was pretty innovative. I think it still kind of is, but it's just gotten really, the cognitive load of that kind of math has gotten really kind of annoying. And honestly, the reason I developed SK and Red Sun, well, there's many reasons, but one reason is because, as you know, as a game designer, I don't like a bunch of fiddly dice too much because I feel like they become gimmicky and they're not really assisting in the game, particularly in the storytelling element of the game, which honestly is really what it's all about, right? I mean, we play these games for different reasons, but ultimately it comes down to storytelling. That's really probably the central theme to a tabletop role playing game. In fact, instead of calling it a role playing game, you could have easily just called it a story based game, and that would have probably been just as accurate to what the genre has become. So all that to say, like I don't like all the different dice. So, right, for example, Red Sun uses only D8, D8 dice pool system, which I'll get to in a second. I don't know why I'm showing you guys D8s. You know what D8s look like. I don't know. Whatever. Um, and then Savage Kingdoms uses a single D20. Since I just showed you a D8, here's a D20. I know, because, right, you've never seen one before. And my point is being that those are sleek mechanics. Those are done on purpose so that we don't have to. And I'm used to also teaching a lot of new players, particularly young new players, but older new players too. And they get so lost on the multiple dice of the D&D system. Obviously, it's pretty easy to get over and figure it out, but it's really slows the game down at first when you're like, is this a D8 or a D10? And why is the percentile dice look the tens die weird? And all the questions you guys have probably heard. So that's kind of why I like to do streamlined systems. However, in the new SK4E that I'm working on, what I'm calling the alternate 4E, maybe 4.1E or something, 4.5, whatever. The new alternate system I'm working on, it kind of brings damage dice back in because I feel like some people kind of miss it, and also it gets rid of some of the cognitive overload. So what I'm getting at, I don't want to spoil, I don't want to be too much spoiler, but I do want to kind of put some of it out there. Say you're making, let's just use a combat example. You're making an attack roll with let's say, a longsword. And so in previous versions of D&D, you want to hit the opponent's defense. Well, you want to get as much over the opponent's defense as possible because that is the base amount of damage you're doing. For every point of success over the opponent's defense is 1 point of damage, health damage that they take. Seems pretty simple, right? And that can be modified by maximum damage because a dagger typically can do no more than 10 unless it's like well crafted and or maybe you have a spell on it, stuff like that. And a great axe might do up to 25 maximum is the normal. And then there might be armor piercing on certain weapons. So all that's pretty quick. Like it's quicker than all the dice in D&D, but not that much because even though you don't have to roll extra damage dice, you still have to compute maximum damage and armor piercing. So in the new system that I'm proposing, in fact, I've already got most of it already written out, the alternate system, probably 2/3 of it already converted. We're adding damage dice. However, it's different. I have a totally different system. I haven't seen how, and I guess I will share it now because what the heck. So, for example, we'll use our longsword example. You in the new SK4E, the alternate version, uh, it's almost like more like D&D. You roll to hit. You're trying to hit the person's defense, the opponent's defense, but you don't have to worry about going over. Although you do in certain battle maneuvers. But like this, there's certain battle talents that if you score 5 above the person's defense, you knock them prone, or you do something, or you disarm them, or whatever, or 10 above. So all that's still in there, which is great because I like that part. But the computing all the different points has gotten kind of annoying to my old brain. And although I'm still pretty fast at it, like I said, but it's just annoying. And then some of the stuff from the past when people were kind of critiquing the system, there were a couple of people did say they thought it was innovative, but they still didn't really like it. You know what I'm saying? And I think they were basically saying there's too much cognitive load if you're doing that 20 times, 30 times in a session. That can be you're kind of defeating your purpose of all the time you're saving with all the rolling all the extra dice like in D&D. So this kind of brings it back to rolling those dice, kind of. So you hit with your longsword. Say you hit your opponent's defense. A longsword does 3d8. So 3d8 damage. You're rolling 3d8, but it's not. You don't add that together. You think, oh well, 3d8. That's just like D&D or any millions of other role playing games. Well, true, but So you're only looking for the highest result. You roll 3D, and I'm just using a longsword example. You roll 3D 8, and you look for the highest number. So we'll say, here, I'm going to roll some off to the side, off a camera here. Oh, we got an 8, 2, and a 1. So 8 points of damage is done. Longsword is a medium weapon, meaning that you would add, if you use it in one hand, you add half of your physique bonus as bonus damage, kind of like strength, modifier in D&D. If you're using it two-handed, you add your full physique modifier, if there is one. So yeah, so for example, let's say our warrior has a physique of +2 in this case. So he swings with a one-handed longsword. He rolled an 8 +1 for half his physique, because he's using a one-handed, so 9 points of damage. There you go. And then armor still works the same. You hit an opponent with 4 points of armor. We'll say it's like really nice brigandine would be 4, or like really nice chain shirt. Subtracts 4, takes 5 points of damage in this example. So pretty fast. I think it's actually a little bit faster. So you're saving time with not having to add all those dice together. Plus, it's different. I'm trying to make it more innovative. And the current system mathematically is I've crunched a lot of numbers on. I've done a lot of this. I know I talk about like not liking math overlord, overlord, but math overlord, overload. What am I saying? Cognitive overload of math, but then at the same time, I really kind of secretly like math. I like I like statistics. I think a lot of game designers do, right? That's one reason we play the game. The main reason I play the game, particularly as an actor, is because I like telling stories. I like enacting stories. But underneath that, not far beneath it, all the kind of fun little math thingies that kind of represent what's going on in the world, right? Is a lot of fun, right? That's the mechanics part of it, the crunch, as it were. So I do like that. So it's kind of a fun little math thing. So let me continue with the example. It's kind of cool. So if you roll, when you're rolling the damage dice, we'll go back to our longsword example. I was rolling 3, right? And I rolled an 8. So if you rolled an 8, it explodes. But it doesn't, you don't roll again. So you look at the dice that you just rolled, a 2, 8, and a 1. And if you roll an 8, you add the lower die together for your total. So in this case, it would have been 1. So 9 points of damage plus, what did I say, +2 or +1 for his physique using a one-handed. If he was using the sword two-handed and a +2 physique, that's another point of damage. So that would have been 11 points of damage, or 10, if it was one-handed. So, which is pretty decent hit on somebody with 4 points of armor. That's right, 5 or 6 points of damage. So that's a decent wound. That's what could be considered a light to moderate wound injury. And that's about where we want. So using it, let's do all kinds of things with this example. 3d8. Here, I'll roll it again. So he strikes again, an 8, 3, and a 1. Wow. So we got another 8. I'm adding the low die to that, which is 1. So he did 9 points of damage again in our theoretical longsword wielder. Or wait, what? Or not? Or 10 or 11, depending if physique is +2 and one hand or two handed with sword. Here, do another one. He's longsword strike. Okay, in this case, I rolled a 4, 2, and a 2. So he only did 4 points of damage, he or she. 4 points of damage, plus whatever variable, like I said, with the physique and stuff like that. So gone is the armor piercing. So now we don't have to worry about. No, actually, take that back. Armor piercing does exist, but not in a base way. And also, I'm still kind of working on it. The reason armor piercing exists in the first place is because A, it's kind of realistic, but B, it was kind of a way to guarantee a little bit more damage when you were swinging with like bigger weapons. Because though they had a maximum damage, here's some nice little secrets of the game. Though the maximum damage was up there, it's still the medium, like it still was the same amount of damage in the low numbers as you were doing with a dagger. So in other words, if you get clipped with a great axe, you're probably gonna, even if you're just nicked, you're gonna feel that probably much more than being nicked by a dagger, right? I think we can all agree that. But with the D8, with this D8 dice system, that all kind of is already in there as well, right? So, yeah. So the only time armor piercing comes in, the way I have it in my head right now is I haven't even written this part out in the rules. Well, kind of, but not entirely. Is that exceptional quality weapons will be AP1. Mastercraft will be AP2. Heroic quality, possibly 3. I haven't quite worked it out. But so my point is, if you're just wielding an average quality weapon, your typical weapon that 80% of the population has, um, then you don't have to worry about armor piercing. But armor piercing would be like if you had a mastercrafted weapon, or also certain spells like lightning blade, ice blade, stuff like that. They add bonus damage. So those really haven't changed. I say really because they might, but right now they have not changed. Meaning that they used to have in the core game um, three armor piercing three, right? So in other words, three automatic points of damage if you hit, if you succeed. So far, I think I kept it three. I'm kind of doing the math on it, and the math comes out, and the sweet spot of the math comes out to be more like 2.5, like the AP should be 2.5. So I'm like, is it going to be two or is it going to be three? Right now, for the elemental ones, it's still three, which is cool because the spell descriptions don't have to change; they're exactly the same. And then like enhanced weapon is a two instead of a three. And the reason that one's different is because it's one magical arts skill level lower. Um, and also, it doesn't have the stigma of being possibly resisted by creatures that have like cold or fire or lightning resistance or something like that. So yeah, right. So that's where armor piercing would still exist, but it doesn't really exist in like a base weapon because it's already covered with the damage here. All right, to continue on with these examples, let's say you were wielding a dagger in combat. So a dagger is only a single D8 damage. So you roll your attack die like you do in the base game and like D&D and like many other games. Compared to the defense, if you hit or succeed, then you would roll. In this case, dagger is 1d4, 1d8. I rolled an 8. So, but note the cool little math thing here is so 8 means it explodes into the next number on the die, right? But you're only rolling 1. So 8's the most you can get with a dagger, which kind of makes sense. And then you add to that possibly decent physique. Now, I'm working on. You could add agility to it. This is kind of a D&D thing where finesse weapons have dexterity and or strength. So right now that exists in the core SK, but you have to take agile weaponry as a talent. So I still might do that where if you take that as a talent, you can use your agility instead of physique to modify the damage on the die roll. So right now, as it stands, that's what's happening. It might become a base rule, but I don't want to lean too hard into the D&D isms, and also realistically, I don't necessarily agree with that either. So, um, right. Yeah. So in this case, we rolled 8 points of damage with a dagger. Most of the time, here we'll roll again. He hits again, 6 points of damage. And again, so if the guy's wearing like 5 or 6 points of armor, he would have taken basically 0 or 1 or maybe 1 or 2 if you had a decent guy with a decent physique. Um, and that's pretty realistic in battle. So I know, and I subscribe to this too. A dagger can kill you just as quickly as well, maybe not as quickly, but just as effectively as a great axe or a great sword or a battle axe or a flail or something. But in combat, and I haven't done martial arts in a while, but I used to like dabble in it a pretty good bit. I'm also a fight choreographer, so I study medieval, particularly medieval combat or combat in general. And so, even as a fight choreographer, even though we're making a stylistic uh, scenes on stage or on film, we still base it, or at least I do for sure, base it pretty much in realism. Like I like to do flashy moves because the audience likes that, but the core of the fight choreography is based on actual fact of what the weapon does. Like if somebody's wielding a mace on stage, I'm going to have them use like the mace is going to do what it should be to the other actor or to the other character. We don't want it to happen to the actual actor. Or a broadsword is going to do what it should, or a rapier is going to do what it should, etc. An arrow is going to do what it should. Too often in Hollywood, sometimes you see fight choreography and you're like, this guy reacted like he just got hit with a giant hammer, and he just got like hit with a dagger that somebody threw from 15 feet away. Um, and I know the reason why some of that happens. I won't go into it. That's a whole. Maybe I should do a video on fight choreography. But anyway, so my point being is that hopefully, we're trying to use some simulation light kind of philosophy here with the game and making it, somewhat based on the actual weaponry. Otherwise, why use the actual weaponry, right? If you're not using what a longsword would do or a mace would do, then don't even call it a longsword or mace. Call it a Kazubal or something or a Kamakamaka. Anyway, so that's a whole nother video as well about realism in fantasy games. So, yeah, what else can I show you? So basically, a dagger is a D8 damage. Oh yeah, so unarmed attack. So punching or kicking someone, an unarmed attack, or using the brawling skill in Savage Kingdoms. That is a half a die. So you roll your D. There's two ways to do it. I haven't quite figured it out which one I'm going to do it because they're both kind of cool. The more literal sense, it's called a half a die damage. So you roll D8 divided by 2, and that's how much you do with your punch, kick, knee, elbow, something like that. So 1 to 4 damage, which kind of fits in the base or old SK game. It was a maximum damage 5 or 8 if you have the heavy hitter talent. So in this new alternative rule, if you have heavy hitter as a talent, you roll a full die. So you could do up to 8, which is fitting in the core rules. So it all pretty fits together. We're just adding a variable, right, with the dice instead of the cognitive load of the bonuses of the d20, right? So that's the whole point. So anyway, the other way of doing the half die damage was you roll 2d8 and you take the lowest, which is kind of cool, kind of fun. I like that mechanic. I have it in Red Sun, so maybe I won't use it just to be a little different. I'm already using the d8s, which is from Red Sun, which is where I came up with it. Because I'm like, I've ordered all these D8s for playtesting. I mean, I have probably 100, 120 D8s, and I've given most of them away and like promotional, like for playtesting and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what? How can I incorporate the D8 and the D20 together? And by the way, that's the only dice we're using in the game system. I'm toying in my head. There's a battle talent that I might have that where you can roll D10s for your damage because I think that might be kind of fun. But then the logistic drawback to that is then you have to bring D10s to the table as well. The reason I like single die types, or in this case just 2 die types, is you can literally just show up to the game table with just those dice. You don't have to worry about any others. But on the other hand, the D10 or even a D12 might be kind of cool. But for now, it's just D20 plus D8s. And the only time you're rolling the D8s are for weapon damage and also spell damage, which I will get to in a second. But let me finish the weapon stuff. Um, so yeah, an unarmed attack is a half a D8 or a full D8 if you have the heavy hitter talent, meaning that you're a pugilist, you're an actual martial artist, and your hits and kicks are doing as much as a club or dagger, which I think is pretty realistic if you're a trained pugilist. A D6, for example, is a 2D8. What's another example of a 2D8? Quarterstaff, spear, a regular spear, hunting spear, war spear is I think 3D8. And let's see, battle axe is 3, and you don't have to say 3d8. I keep saying that just to remind you guys that's what I'm talking about. But in the rules document itself, it just says damage dice, and it just says battle axe 3 or dagger 1 because we know it's a d8, right? So there's no reason to put 1d8, so or 2d8 or whatever the case is. Um, let's see what else. The battle axe is 3 damage dice, 3d8. Great axe is 4. Great sword is 4. So the highest you're going to get. So basically, it goes from half to 4. So four damage dice weapons are great axes. All your great weapons, your heavy, basically great axe, maul, and great sword. So great sword has a slight advantage of having a reach of 2 yards, which I'm going to definitely keep that rule because right now you can do as much damage with a great axe, which costs about a third as much as a great sword. So the great sword, I had to add the little reach thing, and I think that's also pretty realistic. If you're good with a great sword, which is you're looking at a blade length of 5 to 6 feet, um, that's a 2 yard reach. If you if you know what you're doing, if you know how to lunge and counterbalance and all that sweeping slashes as well. Not that you in real fighting you don't really do that much, but anyway, cinematically speaking and tabletop role playing you do because it looks cool. Um, so yeah, let's do some range weapons really quick. So, and I promise I'll end this video shortly. We're almost at half a minute. We're almost at 30 minutes or half an hour. Let's see. Let's see. Hand axe is D6. Okay, javelin is I'm sorry, is 2d8. A javelin is 2 dice. Um, short bow arrow is 2 dice. Longbow is 3 dice. And right now, I might change it, but right now is long composite bow can do 4. And I don't know, that might be a little much. An arrow as opposed to like the swat of a great axe in my head doesn't quite ring true. But if we don't do 4 dice for a she warbow or a long composite bow, it'll probably be 3, but then it'll be some. It already has an advantage over a basic longbow anyway. The range is better. Um, so maybe I don't know. I hate to add armor piercing to a base weapon because that goes against my rules philosophy for this edition. But anyway, we'll figure it out. So it's either gonna be 3 or 4. Crossbow does 3 dice. Some other a sling does 3. Like a regular like hunting sling. A war sling I think is, or no, sorry, a regular sling does 2, and a war sling I think is 3. Um, some other examples of melee would be like a club is just 1 die. Daggers 1 die. Quarterstaff I think was 1. I think I said earlier was 2. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm still working on this stuff. And then you got stuff all the way up to like a ballista. I haven't statted them out yet, but I can imagine a light ballista probably doing 5 damage dice. And since that cued my mind into telling you the next thing about the damage dice. So remember I talked about how if you get an 8 on your damage roll, just 1 8, even if it's 2 8s, it doesn't really, just as long as you get an 8, they explode into the lowest number in the batch, right? So if you're rolling 5 damage dice or more and you roll an 8, that explodes into the next highest number. So you're doing, so it's pretty easy to roll an 8 and then probably like a 7 or 6, which gives you 14, 15 points of damage plus whatever, and if there's any other modifiers. So that tracks how once you get to 5 damage dice, this is like a really powerful fire type spell or lightning type spell or necrotic spell, or something bigger than a great axe, right? Like a giant's axe or a ballista bolt, as we were getting to, or point blank from a catapult blast, which normally is not really a thing because it's arching over, but it could, like, you could still be, it's happened in history where people have taken literal giant boulder shots from a from a catapult. So stuff like that might be 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 damage dice. And so as you can see, the math is kind of fun there because the more dice you're rolling, right, the more chances you're going to roll an 8 and therefore explode into the higher damage. So just to reiterate, 4 dice or less explodes. If you roll an 8, that explodes into the lowest dice that's in the batch that you just rolled. And this is for 2 things. This is because, well, this is really for one thing. So you don't have to pick up a die and roll again. So it's all very quick. This is what I liked about what I'm liking about Red Sun, is you roll the dice and that roll of those dice is telling the whole story. Because, and the reason I say that is you're looking for in Red Sun number of successes, but you're also looking for if more than half are 8s that you roll another die, or if more than half of the dice are 1s, that is a mishap. So you're looking for like 3 different kind of results, right? In the batch of dice. I keep saying batch. I don't know why I'm doing this. So, and it's the same kind of example. So again, once you get into the 5 dice with the new SK, then it explodes upward, and so you're possibly dealing more damage. All right. So the weird thing about that is now we look at falling damage. So I was applying this method of dice and damage to falling damage, and it kind of worked up until about 20 to 30 feet of falling damage, and then after that it doesn't, because falling damage is a whole different thing. It's in real life it would be, or I don't know real life, but it would have armor piercing, right? Or what I'm representing as armor piercing in the world. And so that's how I came up with it. So basically, falling damage it's pretty easy. It's 1d8, 1 dice per 10 feet of falling. And then every 10 feet of falling is also armor piercing 2. So let's say your character you slip and fall from a rooftop onto some cobblestone down below. 20-foot drop. So the GM would be rolling 2 dice and then plus 4, because armor piercing 2 per 10 feet, right? He fell from 20 feet. So here we'll do it. So that's 4 points of damage plus 4. So 8 points of damage. So not terrible from falling from 20 feet. That's actually kind of realistic, I think, when the average character has 10 to 11 health points. So you're staggered, but you're conscious. That would, the real world, that would probably, I mean, people have definitely died from 20-foot, because it's gravity's a thing, right? People even have died from 10-foot falls or even 5-foot falls if you land weird or you're not really good shape. But that's what the health points represent, right? So I think that's pretty cool. Here we'll do another example. So say you fall from 30 feet. So that is 6 points of automatic damage, right? Because armor piercing 2 times 3 for the 30 feet. And then 3d8, still using the regular damage application system. So I rolled 7, 4, and 1. So 7. So 7 and what did I say? 6, right? So 13 points of damage from a 30-foot fall. That's pretty realistic, I think, actually. That is knocking most people unconscious and very close to death. And then people that are not very good shape or they're injured, that's going to kill them. And that's probably right. By the way, the armor does not apply to falling damage. So if you're wearing body armor, except for, let me get to this point, yielding surfaces. When you're falling into a yielding surface, the best example being water, the damage is halved. So where the damage dice is half. So the armor piercing is, oh, now I forgot what the formula was. I literally just wrote it up like 45 minutes ago. Basically, it's half. I can't remember if I made it half the damage dice or if it's literally you roll the full damage that we just did and then you have it. In any case, it's halved. And it has a caveat because you're landing in a yielding surface, right? And this could be not only water, this could be like really deep snow, like 10 feet of snow or something like that. Yeah, or even like really soft silt like sand or something that you, yeah, could even be counted as that as well. But yeah, so also if you fall, if it's water, in the case of water, if you make an athletics check, athletic swimming specialty roll, I think it's against DC 15 or DR 15, difficulty rating 15. That means you've controlled your fall and you've turned it into a dive, and you take uh, half as much weight, or you take no damage. Anyway, you take either half of the half or it's no damage at all. I think it's no damage at all. If it's from, yeah, it's no damage from all if it's from 30 feet or less. And this represents the fact that, a really good diver can enter the water with a really good dive from 30 feet and be pretty much okay. You might get some stinging, but it's not going to be enough to be any real damage, right? Whereas if you land awkwardly, the water's smacking the crap out of you, and you're taking some damage, although it's only half of hitting a non-yielding surface. So I think it's pretty realistic. So not only are we looking for like semi-realism within the fantasy setting, but we're looking for a quick way to resolve it. I think that's pretty quick. You just have to remember every 10 feet falling is a dice, is a damage die, and then sermon piercing 2 per 10 feet, and then all that is halved when the water. And if you turn it into a dive on a successful, no damage at all into the water. So pretty simple. Let me end with this final example. So some of the spells that cause damage, like damaging spells, I'd say they're probably 40% of the SK spells because I just converted most of them over the last 2 days. So now they have damage ratings because they are also figured in the old system where you make an acrobatics roll and every 2 points for every point of success. Or you take you take a point of damage per number over the magical art success that succeeded, and then anyway, as you can see, again, clever at the time. I thought it was pretty clever, but just cognitive load and just I don't know. So now, in the new system would be, for example, Lightning Strike. The Lightning Strike spell, I think, is 4 dice. And it still does all the stuff it used to do, like if you roll 5 over the opponent's defense, it still knocks them prone, unless their physique is +6 or higher, which is like a horse or bigger. So all that neat stuff is still in there. The only thing that had to be converted was whenever there's damage figured in the old system, it's just now damage dice. And they go up to, like, I remember doing the Sunfire spell. It's like a level 10 um, fire and shadow spell. That's that was, gosh, what did it convert it to? Like 6 or 7 damage dice. So again, now I think it's 6. So 6, if it's a crit, it's 8. So 6 again follows that rule to where if you rolled an 8, and out of those 6 dice, you're pretty likely to. You now look at the highest other number, other die, and that's your damage. So you could be rolling 15 damage pretty easily, maybe even 16. So as it should be, right? And that puts us all kind of in the range of how it was anyway. There were maximum damages on spells before, just like with weapons. Now we don't have to worry about that because the maximum damage is already contained with the die rolls. That's the whole point of the system. It's not the whole point, but it's one of the main points. Let's see, what's another good example? A fiery blast spell. I think it's 3 dice of damage, but it has like a smaller of effect. So there's some trade-off with some of the spells. Like some of the spells that have a greater effect or don't have quite as much damage potential. But this goes back to the regular system in the first place. Whereas a single target spell usually packs a little more oomph, and that might do a little bit more damage dice of damage. And then a few things have armor piercing too in the spells, but not. There's very few things that I didn't think were worthy of armor piercing. In fact, maybe like 2 spells have it because the damage dice already told that story, already covered all of that. And I just recently, I'll go through them again. I'm sure they're not. I'm going to find some stuff I need to tweak or whatever. This is all just it's stuff I've been thinking about over the last year and a half, 2 years, but I really started designing on it in the last 3 days. Two, yeah, 3 days. And when I get into this kick, that's what I do. Uh, so what else can I tell you guys? Oh yeah, the last thing I want to leave you with. Remember I was talking at the beginning of the video that the D20 thing is my boon and bane. The exploding 20 thing, in core SK you roll a D20 in case you've never played the game, and because that's always a D20. If you roll a natural 20, it explodes, meaning that you get to roll again. And SK4E, you get the choice of rolling again and adding that, or gaining a +10, flat +10. If you roll a natural 1, I brought the imploding die roll back from 2nd edition or Reforged edition. You roll again and subtract that from the total. And if it's 0 or less, that's a critical failure, right? And if you get a 20 above what you need, that's a critical success. So that's the point of an exploding 20 for the most part. If you're really, really good at something and the DR is really low, you could get a critical success without having to explode a 20, but it's really difficult. So anyway, the thing I'm proposing, I haven't quite pulled the trigger on it yet. It's definitely not written into the rules, is that I'm thinking about somewhat seriously, and again, this is in the name of cognitive overload, of getting rid of the reroll of the d20. This will be controversial, but you still get the +10. So you always get a +10 bonus. This makes math faster and cleaner and less cognitive load. And if you roll a 1, you subtract 10. And you're looking for the same, it's just looking for the same result. If you end up with a 0 or less on you critically failed, bad stuff happens. And if you get 20 above, critical success, just like in previous edition. Like all of that's still the same. And by the way, character creation is still exactly the same. None of this changes character creation whatsoever. So these changes are not as big as you would think. It literally changes. Nothing about character creation doesn't change really any of the talents. It might change a few how they work mechanically, particularly some of the battle talents and even some of the mystical talents, particularly ones attached to literal spellcasting. I just have to reword all this stuff, but with the new mechanics. But yeah, so I'm debating on the d20. I think it's so much easier. Say, for example, you're +5 in the skill that you're trying, and you roll a natural 20. You now just go, oh, +30, and then 5, 35. Math is done. You don't have to re-roll and go, oh, I got a 13. No. I mean, it's not like the most difficult thing in the world, but it does cost a couple more seconds. So this might be a little sleeker. Cuts down on the dice rolling a little bit because we're adding some extra dice rolling from the d8s. But anyway, let me know. Know what you think down in the comments, or tell me personally if you know me, or message me or whatever, and see if you like some of these new changes. So these new changes are not official. I'm thinking they probably will be, because I'll be honest, the last few sessions I ran SK, we finished this big campaign. It was great. I loved it. The players were awesome. The story was great. But especially in some of the big battles, the cognitive overload of computing some of that was just really too much for me, which is why I started switching to running Red Sun. Red Sun is even less cognitive load than even this new system of SK. But it also has probably its own little flaws as well. So this to me was a compromise between Savage Kingdoms and adding a little bit of Red Sun developments into it, kind of, sort of, but not really. I think it alleviates things. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments, or email me or message me or whatever if you know me. So thanks for paying attention, and look for the new Savage Kingdoms 4th edition, hopefully coming out relatively soon. And I'll talk to you guys again later.